They said she was his greatest accessory, a beautiful, silent woman, standing in the shadow of his billion-dollar empire. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, a man who saw value only in stock tickers and social status, agreed. He was so sure of her insignificance that when the invitation to the city's most exclusive gala arrived, he didn't just forget her name, he actively had it blocked. He wanted to shine, alone. But he forgot one thing. A shadow only exists because there is a light. And that light was about to step out of the darkness and burn his entire world to the ground. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home than a museum exhibit dedicated to sterile wealth. Sunlight, which should have been warm and inviting, seemed to chill as it crossed the vast expanses of white marble. The furniture, all sharp angles and unforgiving chrome, was arranged not for comfort, but for effect. This was the world Marcus Thorne had built, and it was the cage Isabella Vance had inhabited for 8 years. Isabella was in the sunroom, the only space she'd managed to claim as her own, filled with overflowing bookshelves and pots of unruly jasmine. She was sketching in a worn, leather-bound book, finalizing logistics for a small auction she was organizing. It was for a local women's shelter. She worked quietly, her movements precise, a stark contrast to the booming, self-assured voice echoing from the study. "Of course, Damien, the table is secured," Marcus was saying, his voice a slick performance of bonhomie. "The Legacy Ball? It's the event. You know my firm, Croft & Thorne. We don't just attend. We make our presence felt. Yes, I'll see you there. It'll be a night to remember." Isabella's pencil paused. The Metropolitan Legacy Ball. For the past 2 months, it was all Marcus had talked about. It was the absolute pinnacle of New York's philanthropic scene, a night where billionaires were made and broken not by an exchange of stocks, but by the subtle nod of an old money matriarch or the placement of their name in the event program. This year, it was benefiting the Children's Art Foundation, a cause that, unbeknownst to Marcus, was deeply important to Isabella. The study door opened, and Marcus emerged, straightening his silk tie. He was a handsome man, in the way a freshly minted coin is handsome, shiny, cold, and stamped with an air of authority. He glanced at her sketches, a small, dismissive smile playing on his lips. "Still tinkering with your little charities, Isabella? It's sweet." He didn't wait for an answer. He moved to the large plate-glass window, looking down at the city he was convinced he owned. That was Damien Croft on the phone. He's ecstatic about the gala. "It sounds wonderful, Marcus," Isabella said, her voice soft. "The Children's Art Foundation does such important work. I was hoping to see their new exhibit." Yes, art, lovely," Marcus said, waving a hand impatiently. He picked up the day's mail from a silver tray. He sifted through it, bills, journals, and finally, a thick, cream-colored envelope. The crest of the Metropolitan Museum was embossed in gold on the back. "Ah, here it is," he said, slitting it open with a letter opener shaped like a miniature Roman sword. He read the invitation, his chest puffing out. Perfect, front and center. Isabella closed her sketchbook, a knot of quiet anticipation in her stomach. She had already found the perfect dress, a deep emerald velvet, modest but elegant. "What is the dress code this year? Celestial black tie, wasn't it?" Marcus finally looked at her. His expression was not one of excitement or even neutrality. It was pity. It was the look a zookeeper might give an animal that didn't understand its enclosure. "Oh, Isabella," he said, and the condescension in his tone was a physical slap. "You misunderstood. This isn't one of your little luncheons." She froze. "What do you mean?" "The firm bought a corporate table this year. It's a strategic move. Damien Croft, several of our Tokyo investors. It's a partners and principals affair. Business, not a +1 situation. The lie was so bald, so poorly constructed, yet delivered with such supreme confidence that Isabella almost gasped. The legacy ball was famously a couples event. It was the entire point, to see and be seen with one's spouse. A business event, she repeated, her voice perfectly level. The jasmine in the room suddenly smelled overwhelmingly sweet, almost suffocating. Exactly. You'd be bored stiff, all shop talk and networking. Trust me, you're better off at home. Order yourself some of that ridiculous pasta you like from Giovanni's. My treat. He smiled, as if bestowing a great kindness. He tossed the invitation onto the marble table, not noticing that as it landed, it slid open. Isabella's eyes dropped to the engraved calligraphy. Mr. Marcus Thorne. Not Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, just his name. The exclusion was a cold, sharp object pressed against her skin. This wasn't a corporate table. This was a deliberate erasure. He had actively ensuring she was not invited. He had, in effect, blocked her. "I see," she said. The two words were quiet, but they landed in the cavernous room with the finality of a gavel. "Good. Glad you understand." He checked his reflection in the darkened window, smoothing his already perfect hair. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call with the Gala committee. Need to confirm my donation is listed correctly in the program. Visibility is everything, darling. Everything." He strode back to his office, the door clicking shut with a heavy, definitive sound. Isabella sat motionless for a full minute. The silence of the apartment was absolute. She looked at her sketches for the women's shelter, drawings of hope, of escape. She had spent 8 years building a life in the margins of his, shrinking herself to fit the small space he allotted her. She had been the pretty, quiet wife, the perfect, unassuming hostess, the woman who tinkered with her little charities. He thought she was a hobbyist. He thought her work was sweet. He had no idea who she was. He had no idea where the money she raised really came from. He had forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to learn, that her grandfather, an immigrant cobbler, hadn't just left her a small inheritance. He had left her a portfolio of brilliant, foundational tech patents that had quietly matured into a fortune that dwarfed Marcus's own. A fortune Isabella had managed herself, in secret, with a skill that would have terrified him. She picked up her phone. She didn't call Giovanni's. She scrolled to a single unlisted number labeled CA. A bright, professional voice answered on the first ring. "Vance Advisory. How can I help you, Miss Vance?" "Hello, Chloe," Isabella said, her voice no longer soft. It was clear and cold, like the marble all around her. "We have a change of plans regarding the Metropolitan Ball. I won't be attending as an anonymous guest." "Oh?" Chloe's voice was intrigued. "Are we finally moving?" "We are," Isabella said, looking at the closed study door. "I need you to call Julian Hayes at the Children's Art Foundation. Tell him his angel donor has a new condition for her donation. I will be attending the gala, and I will need to be seated at the head table. And one more thing, Chloe. Change my name on the donor program. It's not to be listed as anonymous anymore." "What should I list it as, Ms. Vance?" Isabella looked at the invitation again. "Mr. Marcus Thorne." "List the sponsorship under my maiden name," she said, a slow, cold fire beginning to burn behind her eyes. "The sole sponsor, Isabella Vance." The week leading up to the gala was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Marcus was buoyant, floating through their sterile apartment on a cloud of self-congratulation. He spoke at length about the importance of his firm's strategic philanthropy, a term that made Isabella's stomach turn. He was, in his own mind, the King of New York, and this ball was his coronation. He treated Isabella with a cloying, paternalistic kindness, that was, in its own way, more brutal than his usual indifference. "Are you sure you'll be all right, darling?" he asked her 2 days before the event, while a tailor made microscopic adjustments to his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. "I feel dreadful leaving you alone, but business is business. I'll manage, Marcus. I have my own auction to finalize," Isabella replied, not looking up from her laptop. She was cross-referencing shipping manifests for 3 donated sculptures, but she was also, on a separate, password-protected screen, approving a multi-million-dollar wire transfer. "That's my girl," he said, patting her head. The gesture was meant to be affectionate. It felt like an erasure. "Keeping busy. Maybe you can buy yourself a little something at your own auction." He left for a pre-gala planning dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a name. Isabella waited exactly 10 minutes before she, too, left the penthouse. Her destination was a nondescript office building in Midtown. The lobby was aggressively boring, grey walls, fluorescent lighting. But the elevator required a specific key fob, and it took her to a private, unmarked floor. The doors opened into a bright, bustling office that looked more like a tech startup than a financial firm. This was Vance Advisory, the company Isabella had built from the ground up to manage her inheritance. Her assistant, Chloe, met her at the door, handing her a tablet. Chloe was sharp, dressed in a minimalist uniform of black trousers and a silk blouse, her red hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was the only person in the world who knew the full extent of Isabella's operations. "Good evening, Ms. Vance," Chloe said, her voice crisp. Mr. Hayes at the foundation was, well, ecstatic would be an understatement. He cried, "You're not just the lead sponsor. Your donation single-handedly bridged their entire 5-year operating deficit. They were weeks from closing their doors." "They do good work," Isabella said simply, walking into her private office. It was the opposite of her home. Warm woods, soft rugs, walls covered in art from the very children the foundation supported. "He's agreed to all your terms," Chloe continued, following her in. "You are seated at his right hand. The press release has been amended. The only thing he begged for was a chance to meet you privately before the gala, just to thank you. I told him you were private. I'll meet him at the cocktail hour. It's better that way." Isabella sat behind her desk, a formidable piece of reclaimed oak. "Now, what about Marcus?" Chloe's expression tightened. "This is where it gets unpleasant. I ran his name, as you asked. He didn't just not invite you. He personally called the gala committee chair, Beatrice van der Sloot, and had your name removed from the preliminary household list. He cited a private family matter." Isabella's blood ran cold. Beatrice van der Sloot. Of course. Beatrice was the reigning queen of the Upper East Side, a woman whose entire identity was built on exclusion. She had always treated Isabella with a particular, venomous disdain, seeing her as a new money interloper who didn't deserve a man like Marcus. "So he conspired with her," Isabella said. It wasn't a question. "It seems that way. And then there's this." Chloe tapped the tablet. An audio file appeared. "My associate. Well, let's just say she has excellent hearing and was dining at the same unnamed restaurant as your husband tonight." Chloe pressed play. The audio was muffled, filled with the clinking of glasses, but Marcus's voice was unmistakable, laced with scotch and arrogance. "Utterly brilliant, Beatrice, I tell you," Marcus was saying. A woman's high-pitched, braying laugh followed. It was Beatrice. "Oh, Marcus, you are wicked," Beatrice cooed, just telling the committee she was indisposed? A private matter. "It's delicious. She's just not legacy ball material, is she? She's sweet, but she's wallpaper. And that little auction she's running, for the shelter, it's so provincial." I know," Marcus said, and the false sympathy in his voice made Isabella's hands clench into fists. "I try to encourage her, but she doesn't understand our world. This ball is for the big players. It's not a place for her. My flying solo is better for everyone. It shows I'm focused. Damien Croft will see that. He'll see I'm not encumbered." Encumbered? The word hung in the air of Isabella's office, a toxic cloud. He didn't just see her as a boring wife, he saw her as a liability, a weight holding him back from the greatness he so clearly deserved. "And you're sure she won't just show up?" Beatrice asked. "Isabella? Heavens no. She wouldn't dare. She can't even get past a velvet rope without holding my arm. She'll be at home, sketching in her little book. It's for the best. She's simple." The audio file ended. Chloe, ever the professional, stared at the tablet. "Ms. Vance, your instructions?" Isabella was silent for a long time. She looked at a painting on her wall, a chaotic, beautiful splash of primary colors by a 7-year-old girl in the Bronx. She thought of her grandfather, a man who spoke 5 languages, but who was often dismissed as a simple cobbler. He had taught her the difference between noise and value. Marcus was all noise. "He called me wallpaper," Isabella said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Yes, ma'am." "He said I was simple." "Yes, ma'am." Isabella stood up and walked to her window. The view from this office wasn't of the park. It was of the 1,000 other windows of the 1,000 other people working late, a hive of real industry, real effort. "Chloe," she said, turning around, "I have a new task for you. I need you to find me the best divorce attorney in New York, not the flashiest, the most lethal. I want him on retainer, and I want the paperwork drawn up by Monday morning. Consider it done. Second, please arrange for a car to pick me up at 8:00 p.m. on Saturday. Not the house Bentley. I want my own car, the 1962 Aston Martin, the one my grandfather restored." "It's a beautiful choice," Chloe said with a small, appreciative smile. "Finally," Isabella said, "call my couturier, Monsieur Duval. Tell him the emerald velvet is too quiet. I'm thinking of the new design he showed me, the one he called liquid gold. It's time to stop being wallpaper." Chloe's smile widened. "I'll have it messengered to the penthouse tomorrow. Anything else?" Isabella looked at the tablet, at the name Beatrice van der Sloot. "Yes. Please buy 2 tickets for my provincial women's shelter auction. Put them under the names Damien Croft and Beatrice van der Sloot. Send them with my compliments. I want them to have a front row seat to what simple women can achieve." "That," Chloe said, "is brilliant. I'll handle it immediately." As Isabella rode the elevator back down, she felt a strange, cold calm. Marcus had been right about one thing. It was going to be a night to remember. The night of the Metropolitan Legacy Ball arrived on a wave of crisp October air. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, the streets around the museum cordoned off, the sidewalks lined with onlookers hoping to catch a glimpse of the city's elite. Inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was thick with Marcus's self-importance. He had been preening for hours, a whirlwind of cufflink checking, hair smoothing, and speech practicing. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in his Tom Ford tuxedo, a vision of polished arrogance. "The key," he announced to his own reflection, "is to look effortless, as if you were born to be here. Damien Croft respects that. He respects power that doesn't have to shout." Isabella was curled on the chaise lounge in the bedroom, wearing a simple silk robe, a book open in her lap. She had been observing him with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying an exotic and slightly poisonous insect. "You look very handsome, Marcus," she said, her voice a perfect blend of wifely admiration. "Thank you, darling," he said, turning to her. He frowned slightly. "You're still in your robe? I thought you might be going out with one of your friends. That girl from the book club?" "I think I'll just stay in," Isabella said, tucking her feet under her. "I have a slight headache. I think it's the weather." Marcus's face, which had been tight with anticipation, relaxed into genuine, undisguised relief. It was perfect. The lie he had told Beatrice, that his wife was indisposed, had magically become true. He wouldn't even have to manage her disappointment. "Oh, my poor girl, you do look a bit pale." He walked over and gave her another one of his condescending head pats. "That's for the best, then. You rest. It's going to be a long, boring night of business. You're not missing anything, I promise." "I'm sure," she said, offering him a small, weak smile. "Right." He clapped his hands together. "My car is downstairs. The investors are meeting me for a pre-gala cocktail at the Pierre. I'll be late. Very late. Don't wait up." "I won't." He leaned down and kissed her on the forehead, a cold, dry press of lips. "That's my good girl. See you in the morning, and do order that pasta. You deserve a treat." He grabbed his coat, gave himself one last appraising glance in the mirror, and was gone. The heavy thud of the penthouse door echoed through the marble expanse. Isabella waited. She counted to 60, listening to the hum of the apartment. She heard the faint ding of the private elevator arriving in their foyer, and then the whoosh as it descended. He was gone. She closed her book, stood up, and walked into the master bathroom. The pale woman with the headache vanished. In the mirror, a new version of Isabella looked back. Her eyes were clear and bright, not with fever, but with a glacial, focused anger. She turned on the shower, letting the steam fill the room, and began to work. At 7:45 p.m., the woman who emerged from the dressing room was unrecognizable. The wallpaper was gone. In its place stood a work of art. The gown, delivered by Monsieur Duval's personal assistant that afternoon, was not liquid gold. It was something more daring. It was a structured column of midnight blue silk, so dark it was almost black, but woven into the fabric was a thread of pure platinum, so that when she moved, she didn't just shimmer. She seemed to emit her own light like a nebula. It was cut with an audacious, architectural precision. A high neck, long sleeves, but a back that was bare to the waist. It was elegance forged into armor. Around her neck, she wore not the modest pearls Marcus preferred, but a single, breathtaking piece from her grandfather's collection. A vintage Cartier collar of diamonds and sapphires, a piece so significant it was known in auction circles simply as the Romanov star. Her hair was not in its usual simple chignon. It was swept up in a complex, modern twist, severe and powerful. Her makeup was flawless, her eyes defined, her lips a deep, confident crimson. She was not Marcus Thorne's sweet wife. She was Isabella Vance. At 8 p.m. on the dot, the house intercom buzzed, not the main line, but her private one. She walked past Marcus's empty study, through the cold living room and into the foyer. She picked up the receiver. "Miss Vance," the doorman's voice said, suddenly deferential in a way it never was when she was with Marcus. "Your car is here." "Thank you, Miguel. I'm on my way down." She did not take the private elevator. She walked to the main bank, a public statement. As she stepped out into the lobby, the few residents milling about stopped their conversations. They were used to seeing her as a pretty whisper at Marcus's side. They stared, slack-jawed, at the apparition before them. Miguel the doorman rushed to open the heavy glass doors, his eyes wide. "My goodness, Miss Vance, you look—" "Astonishing. Thank you, Miguel," she said, slipping a crisp $100 bill into his hand. The car waiting was not Marcus's gleaming, obnoxious black Ferrari. It was a 1962 Aston Martin DB4, restored to perfection, its color a deep moonlight silver. Chloe sat in the driver's seat, looking impeccable. She stepped out and opened the passenger door. "Traffic is light, Miss Vance," Chloe said, her eyes twinkling as she took in the gown. Monsieur Duval outdid himself. "You look like a queen." "Tonight, Chloe," Isabella said, sliding into the soft leather seat. "That's exactly the idea." As the Aston Martin pulled away from the curb, Isabella looked up at the penthouse, a shining, empty box in the sky. Marcus was, at this very moment, probably at the Pierre, laughing with Damien Croft, bragging about his encumbrance that he had so cleverly left at home. She turned her gaze forward toward the blazing lights of the museum. "Let's go," she said. "I don't want to be late for my own party." The scene at the steps of the Metropolitan Museum was a chaotic symphony of light and sound. Hundreds of photographers were penned behind velvet ropes, their flashes exploding like captive stars. The roar of the crowd was a dull wave, punctuated by the shrieks of reporters calling out the names of arriving celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. Marcus Thorne arrived in his rented Escalade. He thought the Ferrari too gauche for a philanthropic arrival, and stepped onto the red carpet with the confidence of a conquering general. He was immediately swarmed. He was, after all, a major figure at one of the city's top finance firms. Marcus Thorne," a reporter from Vogue called out. "Who are you wearing?" "Tom Ford," Marcus said, striking a practiced pose, adjusting his lapels. "Your firm is a major sponsor this year, correct?" asked a journalist from the Wall Street Journal. "We believe in giving back," Marcus said, his voice smooth as honey. "The Children's Art Foundation is a cornerstone of this city's future, and Croft & Thorne is proud to be a partner in building that future." "Where's your lovely wife, Isabella, tonight?" called a society columnist from the New York Post. This was the moment he had rehearsed. He adopted an expression of solemn, husbandly concern. "Ah, she's dreadfully unwell. Simply heartbroken to miss it. She sends her deepest regrets, of course. She was so looking forward to it." He moved on, soaking in the adulation. He found his boss, Damien Croft, and his wife, Clara, posing near the entrance. Standing with them, looking like a smug, predatory heron in a grey silk gown, was Beatrice van der Sloot. "Marcus, you made it!" Damien boomed, slapping him on the back. "Looking sharp." "You too, Damien. Clara, you look radiant," Marcus said, kissing the air near her cheek. "Oh, Marcus, darling, what a tragedy about poor Isabella," Beatrice purred, her eyes glinting with malicious delight. "Is it that dreadful flu that's going around? She always did seem so delicate." "Something like that," Marcus said, sharing a look of private understanding with her. "She's resting comfortably. She insisted I come and represent the family." "How brave of you," Beatrice said, not even trying to hide her smirk. "Well, let's not let her sacrifice be in vain. Damien was just telling me your firm's donation is second only to the main sponsor. Impressive." "We do our best," Marcus said, puffing his chest. He still didn't know who the main sponsor was. The committee had kept it a closely guarded secret, referring to them only as the Angel. Probably some old money recluse, he figured. He scanned the crowd. "Speaking of, have they announced who the Angel is? Who managed to outbid me?" "Still a mystery," Damien said. "Hayes is keeping it under wraps until his speech. All I know is they saved the entire foundation. They're at the head table, of course. We're at table 2. Still excellent visibility." Excellent, Marcus agreed. He felt a surge of triumph. He was here, at the center of the universe, with the most important people. He had successfully navigated the Isabella problem. He had proven he was a serious player, unencumbered. His world was perfect. At that exact moment, a ripple of confusion went through the press line. The main arrivals had finished. The security team was beginning to relax. Then, a car unlike any other that night pulled up. It wasn't a modern black SUV or a flashy limousine. It was a vintage silver Aston Martin. The press, sensing an unscheduled arrival, surged against the ropes. Who is that? Is that a studio head? An actor? It's not on the list. A collective hush fell as the driver, a chic woman in a black suit, opened the passenger door. A single, midnight blue, silk and platinum-clad leg emerged, followed by the woman attached to it. Isabella Vance stood up. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The flashes, which had been sporadic, erupted into a single, blinding, continuous wall of light. The sound was deafening. She didn't pose. She didn't preen. She simply stood for a moment, letting them take it in. The wind caught the sleeve of her gown, and the platinum threads ignited under the lights. The Romanov star around her neck seemed to absorb all the light in the vicinity and focus it into a single, devastating point of brilliance. "Who is that?" a reporter yelled. Wait, is that Isabella Thorne?" someone from the Post shouted, recognizing her but unable to process the transformation. "That's not Isabella Thorne," another whispered, awestruck. "That's a goddess." She took her first step onto the carpet. She didn't look at the photographers. She just walked, her posture perfect, her expression serene and unreadable. The press parted for her like the Red Sea. Inside, at the top of the steps, Marcus, Damien, and Beatrice heard the commotion. "What on earth is that?" Beatrice said, annoyed at the interruption. "Did a Kardashian show up unannounced?" Marcus turned. He looked down the long red carpet, past the velvet ropes, to the source of the blinding light. He saw the gown. He saw the jewels. He saw the face. The blood drained from his head so fast he felt dizzy. His smile, fixed in place, cracked and dissolved. It was impossible. She was at home. She was sick. She was wallpaper. This woman was not wallpaper. This woman was a supernova. "Marcus," Damien Croft said, noticing his partner's sudden pallor. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "That," Marcus whispered, his throat closing, "that's Isabella." Beatrice van der Sloot's head snapped around. Her perfectly painted mouth fell open. "It can't be." But it was. Isabella was gliding up the steps, a vision of impossible elegance and power. She wasn't looking for him. She wasn't scanning the crowd nervously. Her gaze was fixed on the entrance, a queen returning to her court. "My God," Clara Croft whispered, clutching Damien's arm. That is Isabella Thorne?" "I had no idea." "She's not on the list," Marcus stammered, the word sounding idiotic even to his own ears. He had made sure of it. "She's coming right for us," Beatrice hissed, her face a mask of confusion and fury. Isabella reached the top of the steps. She paused, and for the first time, her eyes met the small group. She looked at Damien and Clara and gave them a polite, infinitesimal nod. She looked at Beatrice, and her expression didn't change, her gaze passing over her, as if she were a piece of furniture. Then, finally, her eyes landed on Marcus. She looked at her husband, the man who had called her an encumbrance, the man who had left her at home. She looked at him with the cool, distant appraisal one might give a stranger who had bumped into them on the subway. And then, without a word, she turned and walked past him, heading for the main doors. The entrance to the grand hall was guarded by a phalanx of security, all wearing earpieces, and at their head, a formidable woman named Ms. Davies, the Gala's director of security. She held a tablet with the definitive, final guest list. As Isabella approached, Ms. Davies stepped forward, raising a polite but firm hand. "Good evening, ma'am. May I have your name, please?" "Isabella Vance," Isabella said, her voice clear and calm. Ms. Davies's brow furrowed. She tapped her tablet. "I'm sorry, I don't have an Isabella Vance on the list. Perhaps you're under a different—" She squinted. "You look familiar, are you? Mrs. Marcus Thorne?" "I am Isabella Vance," Isabella repeated, her tone unwavering. Behind her, Marcus, having shaken off his paralysis, was storming over, his face a mottled, furious red. Beatrice and the Crofts followed at a distance, desperate to witness the inevitable, humiliating ejection. "Isabella," Marcus hissed, grabbing her arm. His fingers dug into the delicate silk. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? I told you." Isabella didn't flinch. She slowly turned her head and looked down at his hand on her arm, and then back up to his face. She said nothing, but her expression was so cold, so laced with contempt, that he involuntarily let go, as if he'd been burned. "There seems to be a mistake, Miss Davies," Marcus said, trying to regain control. He laughed, a strained, panicked sound. "My wife is confused. She wasn't feeling well. She's not on the list. I'm Marcus Thorne, Croft and Thorne, table 2. I'll just be escorting her out. A private family matter." He reached for her arm again. "Come on, Isabella. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" Isabella said, her first words to him. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the lobby. "Marcus, you don't even know the meaning of the word." Miss Davies looked between the two, her hand moving to her earpiece. "Mr. Thorne, I'm afraid if the lady is not on the list, I cannot let her pass." "Exactly," Marcus said, triumphant. "She's not on the list, I should know. Now come along, Isabella." "She's quite right," Isabella said, turning back to the security director, completely ignoring Marcus. "I'm not on your list." "Then I must ask you to leave," Miss Davies said, her face hardening. "I'm not on the guest list," Isabella continued, as if Miss Davies hadn't spoken, "because I am not a guest." Marcus blinked. "What?" "Isabella, stop playing games. It's over. Go home." Beatrice van der Sloot had drifted closer, a viperous smile on her face. "Oh dear, this is just tragic. Poor thing. She must have had a fever dream." At that precise moment, the grand, gilded doors to the ballroom swung open. A man in a state of high agitation, his tuxedo immaculate, his hair slightly frazzled, rushed out. It was Julian Hayes, the director of the Children's Art Foundation. He had been waiting by the door for 20 minutes, terrified his mysterious benefactor had changed her mind. He saw the commotion at the security desk. He saw Miss Davies, he saw the furious-looking Marcus Thorne, and he saw the woman in the midnight blue gown. His entire body went rigid with recognition and relief. "My God, there you are!" Hayes exclaimed, shoving past a startled security guard. He rushed toward Isabella, his hands outstretched, his face a picture of pure, unadulterated joy. He completely and totally ignored Marcus Thorne, pushing past him as if he were a coat rack. He skidded to a halt in front of Isabella, taking both of her hands in his. "Miss Vance, you're here. You're really here. I don't know what to say. I was so worried." Isabella smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her face. "Mr. Hayes, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. You've built a wonderful organization." Miss Davies's face went white. She stared at her tablet, then at Hayes, then at Isabella. "Mr. Hayes, this is "This," Julian Hayes announced, his voice booming with emotion as he turned to the security director, "is our guest of honor. This is our savior. Miss Davies, please, this is Isabella Vance." He then looked past her, at the still frozen Marcus. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, I see you've met our angel." Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Beatrice van der Sloot looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her eyes darted from Hayes to Isabella, the cogs in her brain grinding, trying to make sense of the words angel and Isabella in the same sentence. "Miss Vance," Hayes said, offering his arm to Isabella. "Your table is ready. The mayor is waiting. Please allow me." "Thank you, Julian," Isabella said. "Miss Davies," Hayes said over his shoulder, "please ensure no one bothers Miss Vance for the rest of the evening. She is to have anything she wants." "Of course, Mr. Hayes. My apologies, Miss Vance," the security director stammered, stepping aside immediately. Isabella laid her hand on Julian Hayes's arm. She turned, gave one last, lingering look at her husband, who was still rooted to the spot, a statue of impotent rage and confusion. She looked at Beatrice, whose face was a glorious mask of horror. Then she turned her back on them, and, on the arm of the Foundation's director, was escorted into the grand ballroom, leaving a wake of shattered assumptions and absolute silence behind her. Marcus was left standing outside the velvet rope, a guest at a party that, he was beginning to realize, wasn't his at all. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum was a breathtaking sight. Soaring arches, massive bouquets of white orchids, and the soft golden glow of 1,000 candles transformed the space into a fairy tale. As Isabella entered on Julian Hayes's arm, a hush fell over the room. Everyone, the bankers, the politicians, the old money families, turned to look. They didn't know who she was, but they knew, instinctively, that she was the most important person in the room. Julian escorted her past table 2, where Damien and Clara Croft were already seated. Damien, a man who prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, was staring, his wine glass halfway to his lips. He watched as Isabella, the woman he'd been told was delicate and unwell, glided past his table without a glance. She was led to the head table, a long, raised dais at the front of the room. Julian seated her at his right hand, in the seat of the guest of honor. The mayor of New York, seated to her left, immediately turned to introduce himself, captivated. Back in the lobby, Marcus was in a state of shock. "Mr. Thorne," a junior event staffer said, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Thorne, you're at table 2 with Mr. Croft." Marcus couldn't move. "No," Beatrice hissed, finally finding her voice. She grabbed Marcus's arm. "There is a mistake. She must have... Maybe she's a distant relative of his? Maybe she volunteered?" "Mr. Thorne," the staffer repeated, more insistently. "The opening remarks are about to begin." Damien Croft, seeing his partner still standing in the doorway like a lost child, gestured impatiently. "Marcus, get over here. What's going on?" Marcus, moving like a man in a trance, stumbled toward his table. He collapsed into his seat, his tuxedo suddenly feeling like a lead suit. "Marcus, what the hell was that?" Damien demanded in a low voice. "You said she was sick." I thought she was," Marcus mumbled, his eyes locked on the head table. He watched Isabella laughing at something the mayor said. She looked radiant, powerful, and utterly, terrifyingly unfamiliar. "Well, she seems to have made a miraculous recovery," Clara Croft observed, her voice dripping with ice. "And she knows Julian Hayes, intimately, it would seem." "No," Marcus said, shaking his head. She doesn't. She runs a little charity. For a shelter, it's nothing." Her nothing just got her the head table, Marcus, Damien snapped, while we're sitting here at table 2. The implication was clear. You, my partner, are at the secondary table, while your wife, the wife you dismissed, is at the primary. This makes you look weak. Beatrice, who had slithered to her own seat nearby, was watching Isabella with a look of pure, concentrated venom. That necklace, that's the Romanov star. I saw it at a Sotheby's preview. It was valued at $50 million. $50 million. Where did she get that? Marcus had no answer. He just stared. The lights dimmed. The orchestra quieted. Julian Hayes walked to the podium, a single spotlight following him. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, Julian began, his voice shaking with genuine emotion. Welcome to the Legacy Ball. We are here tonight to celebrate art, to celebrate the future of our city's children. But I'll be honest with you. 6 weeks ago, we were not planning a gala. We were planning a press conference to announce the permanent closure of the Children's Art Foundation. A shocked gasp rippled through the room. Our funding had been cut. Our endowment was dry. We were, to put it simply, finished. Julian paused, looking out at the crowd. And then we received a call. A single anonymous donor. An angel, as we came to call her. A person who saw the value in what we do, who believed that a child with a paintbrush is just as important as a trader with a stock portfolio. Marcus's heart was hammering against his ribs. He felt a cold sweat on his brow. No, it's not possible. It's a coincidence. She met Hayes at a luncheon. This one person, Julian continued, his voice cracking, didn't just give a donation. She gave us a future. She secured our entire 5-year operating budget. She saved, quite literally, the dreams of thousands of children. The room erupted in spontaneous, thunderous applause. For weeks, Julian said, our angel insisted on remaining anonymous. She wanted no credit, no fanfare. But we at the foundation, we felt it was our duty to thank her. We begged her to at least attend tonight, so that we could honor her. Tonight, she has graciously agreed to step out of the shadows. At table 2, Marcus gripped the stem of his wine glass so tightly he was surprised it didn't shatter. Damien Croft was leaning forward, his gaze fixed on Julian, his expression one of intense calculation. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian said, beaming, his eyes finding Isabella. Our angel is not some distant, faceless corporation. She is a woman of profound grace, intelligence, and a quiet, staggering generosity. She is the living proof that one person can indeed change the world. It is my profound, profound honor to introduce the sole sponsor of this year's Metropolitan Legacy Ball. The spotlight on Julian snapped off. A drum roll began. The entire room was silent, holding its breath. Marcus was shaking his head, whispering, "No, no, no, no." "Please stand," Julian's voice boomed from the darkness, "and join me in thanking Ms. Isabella Vance." A single brilliant spotlight hit the head table, illuminating Isabella. She rose slowly, gracefully from her seat. The platinum threads in her dress seemed to explode with light. She looked like a statue carved from moonlight and steel. For a second, there was absolute silence. The name Vance didn't register. But the woman, they had all seen her. And then, as one, the entire room, the billionaires, the senators, the artists, the old money matriarchs, got to their feet. The applause that followed was not polite. It was a deafening, visceral roar of adulation and respect. At table 2, Damien Croft was standing, clapping enthusiastically, a look of dawning, cold comprehension on his face. Clara was also standing, her eyes wide with amazement. Only 2 people were still seated. Beatrice van der Sloot, who was frozen in her chair, her face a grotesque mask of disbelief. And Marcus Thorne. He was physically incapable of standing. He was staring at his wife, the simple, delicate wallpaper, as she was given a standing ovation by the most powerful people in the world. The woman he had actively blocked from the guest list. Damien Croft, still clapping, looked down at his partner. His expression was no longer friendly. It was contemptuous. "Marcus," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Get up. You're making a scene." Numbly, his legs shaking, Marcus pulled himself to his feet. He put his hands together in a weak, pathetic clap. He watched as Isabella, his wife, his encumbrance, smiled, took the microphone from Julian and prepared to speak. "Thank you, Julian." Isabella's voice rang out, clear and steady. It was not the soft, hesitant voice Marcus was used to. This voice had an unfamiliar timbre of command. "Thank you all." The applause slowly died down, but the entire room remained standing, captivated. "My grandfather," Isabella began, "was a cobbler. He came to this country with nothing but a set of tools and a belief that value and price were two very different things. He would often tell me that the loudest person in the room is usually the most insecure. He taught me that true power, true legacy, is quiet. It's in the work you do when no one is watching." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. She was talking about him. "For years," she continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "I have managed his legacy in that spirit. Quietly, believing that the work was what mattered, not the recognition. The Children's Art Foundation is a testament to that belief. It gives a voice to children who have none. It teaches them that their ideas have value, that they have value, even if the world isn't watching." She paused, and her eyes found Marcus in the crowd. He was just a face in the sea, but she found him. Their gazes locked. "But tonight," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "I learned that sometimes quiet isn't enough. Sometimes to protect the work, you must be loud. You must be visible. Sometimes you must be willing to step into the light and claim your space, especially when others try to take it from you." A ripple of understanding went through the room. This was more than a speech. This was a statement. "So I am here tonight, not just as a donor, but as a promise. The Isabella Vance Fund will ensure that this foundation and others like it will never have to beg for survival again. The work will continue. The voices will be heard." She raised her glass to the children and to the value of work that is, for too long, unseen. The room erupted. The standing ovation was even louder this time. The mayor hugged her. Julian Hayes was openly weeping. As she returned to her seat, a line formed instantly. Senators, tech billionaires, and the very matriarchs who had ignored her for years were now falling over themselves to shake her hand, to introduce themselves, to praise her vision. "Ms. Vance, a truly inspiring speech." "Isabella. May I call you Isabella? We must have lunch." Beatrice van der Sloot, having recovered her composure, tried to push through. "Isabella, darling," she gushed, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I had no idea. You were keeping all this a secret. How quaint. You must let me host a dinner for you." Isabella turned to her. She gave Beatrice a slow, polite smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Beatrice, thank you for your concern over my health earlier. As you can see, I'm feeling much better." She then turned away, mid-sentence, to grasp the hand of a museum curator. "Mr. Harrison, I so wanted to discuss your new acquisitions." Beatrice was left talking to air, her face burning. She had been dismissed. Publicly. Marcus, meanwhile, was trapped at his table. Damien Croft sat back down, took a long, slow sip of his whiskey, and looked at his partner. "An encumbrance, you said." Damien's voice was quiet, lethal. "You told me she was simple. You told me she was sick." "Damien, I didn't know," Marcus stammered. It's a shock to me too." "Is it, Marcus?" Damien said. "Or did you just never bother to ask? You humiliated her. You lied to me. You lied to Beatrice. And in doing so, you have made this firm, my firm, look like a joke. You've been lapped by your own wife, and you didn't even know you were in a race." "Damien, I can fix this." "No, you can't." Damien cut him off. "She just announced a philanthropic fund that will change the landscape of this city. She's the new power player. And you? You're the fool who blocked her from the guest list. You're a liability, Marcus. Clean out your desk on Monday. Our partnership is dissolved." Damien stood up and walked away, leaving Marcus alone at the table, the plates of food untouched, his world collapsing in on him. It took him an hour to get to Isabella. She was in a quieter corridor, accepting the final congratulations. He grabbed her, this time by the wrist, and dragged her into an alcove. "Isabella!" he hissed, his face pale and slick with sweat. "What is this? What did you do? You humiliated me. That was my night. Our partnership is dissolved. You ruined me." Isabella slowly, deliberately, removed his hand from her wrist. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw her. He saw the intelligence he'd mistaken for simplicity, the strength he'd mistaken for delicacy. "No, Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourself. You just didn't know it until tonight. But the money, where?" "My grandfather's portfolio, the one you called quaint. While you were playing with your firm, I was building an empire, the one that just paid for this entire event. But us," he said, his voice desperate. "Isabella, we can work this out. We can be a power couple. Think of what we could do together." Isabella almost laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "Us? Marcus, you didn't just not invite me. You called Beatrice van der Sloot and had my name removed. You called me wallpaper. You called me an encumbrance. You told your boss I was simple." His face went white. How did you—" "It doesn't matter," she said, adjusting the sleeve of her gown. "You made your choice. You wanted to be unencumbered. Well, congratulations. You are." She started to walk away. "Wait!" he cried, reaching for her. "Where are you going?" Isabella stopped and looked back at him, a man so thoroughly and completely diminished. "I'm going home, Marcus, to my home. My lawyers will be sending a courier to the penthouse in the morning. He will wait while you pack your things, your suits, your cufflinks, your Tom Ford. Be out by noon. I'm changing the locks." She left him in the alcove, a ghost at his own coronation. Isabella Vance walked out of the museum, not to the line of black cars, but to the silver Aston Martin waiting at the curb. Chloe was in the driver's seat, smiling. Isabella got in, and as the car pulled away, she looked at her reflection in the window. She saw the Romanov star, she saw the midnight blue gown, and she saw the woman who had finally stepped out of the shadow. The Gala was still roaring behind her, but she was driving away into the quiet, starlit city, and for the first time in 8 years, she was, finally, free. And so, Isabella Vance proved that the most dangerous person isn't the one making the most noise, but the one no one sees coming. She didn't just attend a party, she rewrote her entire life, turning her husband's cruelest insult into her greatest victory. He wanted her name off the list, and she ended the night with her name carved onto the building's foundation. Her story is a powerful reminder. Never, ever underestimate the person sitting quietly in the corner. They aren't just listening, they're planning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you were on the edge of your seat and loved seeing Isabella get her revenge, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring that bell. We have so many more stories of drama, revenge, and incredible twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video.